Dr. Gorka, always a pleasure. Thank you so much for joining us. So what about that? I mean, here we have a lot of tricks being played from the left. We saw those Veritas videos, and Trump is basically saying they're capable of anything. I wouldn't be surprised.
Not only that, they're capable of politicizing repeatedly national security. Let's remind the viewers, we owned Mosul. Marines and soldiers owned that city. We're fighting for it again. Why? Because Hillary Clinton, as Secretary of State, and President Obama decided Iraq was no longer important and we should pull out in 2011. As a result of that decision, we have in partial culpability the rise of ISIS. So let's talk about the facts and let's not politicize national security.
We also saw WikiLeaks this past week basically saying they said, look, we want to do the status of forces agreement, and Obama said, no, we're fine.
Can we put that to bed for a second?
Yeah.
Just jettison this status of forces argument. How is it that we have 5,000 troops in Iraq, but we don't have a status of forces agreement? This is smoke and mirrors.
So explain the status of forces agreement and why that was so important.
So status of forces agreement, we have dozens of these around the world. This is a legal instrument whereby a host government says U.S. troops can stay here, and these are the legal protocols for their being in country. We have this wherever we have troops, okay, whether it's Korea or whether it's elsewhere. The Obama administration was desperate to pull out of Iraq because, remember, the senator from Illinois, when he ran for office, said Afghanistan is the good war, Iraq is the bad war. So they had to pull out of Iraq because that was his platform when he ran for president. And as a result, he needed an excuse.
Wow.
Not having a SOFA agreement with Maliki, that was an excuse. Of course we could have had one.
I want to get your take on each candidate and their approach to foreign policy. But before I get there, let me ask you about Russia. Because the relationship between the U.S. and Russia obviously is getting worse, and it is heating up. Russia has just unveiled its latest nuclear missile, which it claims it is capable of wiping out landmass the size of Texas or France. This coming as Russia conducts bomb shelter drills, worsening relations with the United States. Putin is saying, everybody, diplomats, come home. What is going on here? What are you anticipating? And is this the threat of a nuclear attack?
No. If Russia went to war with us, they would lose that war in a conventional sense. So we have far greater capabilities even after 7 years of Obama in office. This is a brinkmanship. This is like the Cuban Missile Crisis. This is classic KGB modus operandi. Remember, who was Putin? Putin was a colonel in the KGB. How do they operate? They prod, they prod, they prod until they see what? A lack of resistance, and then they fill the vacuum. That's what they've done in Crimea. That's what they're doing in Syria. They see a lack of American leadership, and then they escalate their presence in a given region.
And do you remember a couple of years ago when President Obama whispered to then-President Medvedev, I'll have a lot more leverage after the election.
Right.
It seemed like Obama really had the relationships in Russia, and yet the Dems have this whole narrative that Trump is all about Russia.
Again, let's talk about reality versus spin.
Exactly.
When Secretary Clinton was a cabinet member, she had to sign off on the sale of 20% of our uranium to Russian front companies that belong to the Kremlin. At the same time as she approves that sale, that is a strategic decision, our uranium, her husband gets $140 million from the same companies buying the uranium. If anybody is in the pocket of Vladimir Putin, it is not Mr. Trump, it is Hillary Clinton.
Well, let's be clear about what uranium is for those people who may not know.
Sure.
This is the substance used to make
nuclear weapons. Yes.
And that's why the U.S. had such pushback for so many years before that transaction took place about selling any uranium to Russia.
Right, because
isn't that right?
That's why the cabinet has to approve it. This isn't just, selling real estate in Manhattan. You are selling a strategic asset from this nation that is not only used for our power plants, is used for nuclear warheads.
Incredible, incredible. What is your take on the two policies? Look at Hillary Clinton and her approach, potential approach to fighting ISIS to dealing with Russia versus Donald Trump's?
Right. So for full disclosure, I've met Donald Trump several times. I advised him last year on national security issues. I am not part of his campaign, but I've met this man and we've talked national security. He had a very steep learning curve last year, but he has gathered some excellent people around him. Walid Faris, General Flynn, these are tier one echelon experts. So he has absorbed what they had to say to him. So one thing about him, he knows we are at war and he wants to win. Let's compare that to Hillary Clinton. Hillary Clinton is said to be very pragmatic, so we'd have a third Obama term, but even more pragmatic. Looking at what we have available from Clinton Cash and WikiLeaks, she would be pragmatic, indeed, Maria. Yeah. Pragmatic about one thing, herself. Our national security interests would be open to the highest bidder. The highest bidder would be the person she would listen to.
Yeah, it's hard to make the argument that she wasn't in charge of so much with regard to our foreign policy.
Libya, Syria,
she was
Iraq.
the Secretary of State.
Look at the last 7 years. Pick a region of the world, whether it's China building those atolls for military bases, whether it's the Russian reset, whether it's the rise of ISIS, whether it's the Iran deal. Name an issue that hasn't made us more unsafe. Yeah. And she was in the driving seat.
Yeah, and national security, one of the top issues for voters.